The things that would be highly interesting to students, right? Really engaging to students, we don't have time for it because they test so much. There's weeks and weeks of testing and practice for testing. So the fun math activity that involves art or involves music, the teachers can't do it. And then that's not as great for the students.
Hello, and welcome back to Off the Lesson Plan podcast. I'm your host, Steve, and today I have a special guest, my amazing sister, Dr. Eileen Voltz, and she's here today to talk to us about what life has been like in the traditional school environment. Tell us a little bit about your experience as a teacher, please, Eileen.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. My brother, also a doctor, right? So following in his footsteps, but schools have changed a lot over the last 35 years I've been a teacher. So I taught 31 years in the public school system as a high school math teacher. And now I teach at the university level. I've taught the last 4 years teaching math education majors, getting them prepared to go in the classroom. So it is the best career for sure, but things have changed substantially in the last 30 years, 35 years. And also I have a 13-year-old, so I'm seeing it, firsthand through him as well.
That's great. Let me embellish that a little bit if I can. So Eileen started out in middle school at Glasgow, correct?
High school, actually, yeah.
I thought it was
but I
middle
did
school.
teach, I taught 3 years of middle school math, and God bless the middle school teachers. But then I moved on to teach high school in Delaware, the state of Delaware, and then ended up in 21 years teaching at one of the top STEM schools in the country.
Right. Charter school, the Charter School of Wilmington, which is an amazing school.
So,
And Eileen is again, this is the overly doting brother, award-winning coach in both softball and basketball, women's sports. And I might add, winner of the Presidential STEM medal or award for the state of Delaware. One math teacher and one science teacher per state is awarded that prestigious honor per state, and Eileen won in, I think it was 2021 or
2019, actually.
2019.
It was 2019, and then we celebrated in Washington, D.C. in after the pandemic.
After the pandemic,
2022.
Right. So while I'm a professor of engineering, I've never done any teaching at the public school level. So I'd love to hear whatever you want to talk about. What's it like? What was it like when you first started as a teacher? What was it like getting your education degrees? Obviously, you have 3 of them. So, we're just here to have a conversation. So tell us what you think about all that.
So I think what's interesting is back, when I first started teaching, so this would be 1991, teachers were largely able to do what they wanted in their classrooms, and they were trusted to do what they wanted to do in their classrooms. And, unfortunately, most things in the world are connected to money. So then there's a lot of, mandates and state testing and textbooks. And through all that, there became a lot more micromanagement in a classroom for what teachers should teach and how they should teach. And when our country was worried about that our students are falling behind mathematically against other countries, at least in math and in other subjects too, they honestly have taken curriculum and pushed it down to lower grades. So, right now we will have students in 6th, 7th grade doing things that we learned in 9th or 10th grade. And the problem is a lot of it is likely developmentally inappropriate. Like they're not able to do these things yet. And we wonder why the math scores are low or the ELA scores are low. And, I think it's a lot of different factors coming together. But, from a teaching point of view, when I first started teaching, teachers were very much trusted. And now I think, the relationship between parents and teachers can be tricky. There's maybe not the trust that used to be there. And there's some confusion of the curriculum, and everyone wants their kids to do great. And so right now, I think our school system is failing in a lot of ways, especially since COVID.
Well, that's my assessment because I'm on the receiving end of your output. I've been teaching at the university since 1997. And before that, I was a researcher at a federal lab. And I can see, even in my case, in the last nearly 30 years, wow, of being at the university level, a definite decrease in a lot of things in terms of student preparation,
Mhm.
work ethic, and just basic subject matter knowledge and mastery of the basics has really fallen behind.
Mhm.
And so one thing I would like to ask you, since you were teaching before the No Child Left Behind policy
Mhm.
came out, I believe around 2001 or two, was that one of the first occurrences that, or one of the first good ideas with unintended consequences that began us on this path, or how would you, what started the ball rolling down the hill here in terms of you not having as much freedom and liberty to teach the way that you, as the expert teaching your subject, should be left to teach your subject?
I do think this problem has a lot of different factors, right?
Okay.
So, number one, students are coming into school less prepared. We have people starting kindergarten who are not potty trained. And I'm not talking about special needs kids, I'm talking about typical kids. We have kids coming into kindergarten, they don't know their letters, they don't know their numbers. So, our generation had a little more of watching Sesame Street and learning the colors and learning the letters. And of course, the schools taught you all that. But the irony of it is when 40 years ago, students went to school for half day kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Now they go to school full day kindergarten. When we were in kindergarten, it was largely play,
Mm-hmm.
including a nap time and a half day.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have kindergartners. These are 5, 6-year-olds sitting in classrooms, not enough play, not enough recess, and just a lot of sitting. And, I read an interesting story. Our generation's the first that sits so much, and we're indoors so much. And these kids' bodies aren't built for that. And boys in particular, I think, are interesting because they're active. And we're asking them to sit still for too long, and then we wonder why they're distracted. So I think there's a lot of different things, but coming in right out of the jump, we have students, that just, it's not enough fun, it's not enough
Right.
play, and they're coming in already in a deficit probably than when we went to school.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That would be my guess as to what's happening. Again, we both have kids about the same age, and when I saw them in VPK coming home with homework,
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, this must just be this overachiever school in a very good neighborhood where we lived here in Florida, only to find out after talking with you, Eileen, that it's everywhere. And I just don't understand how we got there. And I think that if learning is fun and enjoyable, your mind, your heart, your soul is open to learn. And when it becomes a chore,
Mm-hmm.
when we're treating kids in kindergarten and first grade like they're going to a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've spoken about this before in this podcast, especially for boys. Girls are they mature a little faster. They're able to sit. I was saying in the last podcast on this topic, crisscross applesauce that works for girls
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work for boys.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, I know that you didn't teach the elementary level, but when you were growing up, how many male teachers did you have before middle school? Did you have any?
I mean, so we did. Our PE teacher,
Mr. Casey, was he
Mr.
still there?
Casey. He
Yeah,
was
yeah.
a PE teacher. Yep. At good old Harrison High School there.
Still-
Harrison Elementary, right?
Still without hair, I'm assuming, at the time. But
Yeah.
yes,
And I think, some of that's happening because generally speaking, elementary teachers will be moms,
Mhm.
that will teach. And then when they have kids, they stay home. And then when their kids are older, they go back to school, right? So now they have the same schedule as their kids.
Mhm.
Snow days, they're able to stay with their kids. So it's a heavily female occupation. And there are more male teachers at my son when he was in K-5 there. So I do think that's happening. There's more male paraprofessionals. So these are individuals that work with special needs kids. So I think that's important. Just that some students respond better to males than females. But yeah, and it wasn't until middle school and high school that there was more male teachers.
What about, I never thought about this till now. Thanks for your answer, by the way. Because for me, my first male teacher besides Mr. Casey in PE
Mhm.
was my 6th grade teacher.
Oh,
Anyway, Mr. Myers. But
yes.
what about administrators and what about staff?
I mean, in my career, I actually had a lot of female administrators. I think that's more and more common now. I think when I was a student, it tended to be males,
Okay.
but I think some of this is what's happening, right? So our mom stayed home with us, and this is what was typical back then, not for everybody, but for more people, and now we have an economy that's having both parents work. You got to send your kid to daycare. Daycares are expensive. People then have to have two jobs. Like a lot of teachers I know, I mean, have more than one job because
Right.
the salary's not great until you get a little more experience. So, I think that, you asked earlier what it is with teachers and the not trusting teachers. And I think it's more just people are worried about how our students are doing. And instead of trusting the teachers, we are telling them what to do, and some of the things they're telling teachers to do probably aren't what's best for the kids, and this is where we are.
I see. Well, that makes sense. So in terms of the changes that you've seen as a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
clearly we grew up in a different time, you and I. But in terms of from 1991 until now, okay, we talked about pushing course material to lower grades when basically cognitively the brain hasn't developed
Mm-hmm.
enough. We had this conversation last week, right, about geometry versus algebra 2. Even for 15-year-olds, geometry is, well, tell us what your take on that was.
Yeah, so I always remember this story. I taught an honors geometry class, and it was all 10th graders. And I had one senior. She moved from another state. Different states do different orders for curriculum, right? So some cases do algebra 1, algebra 2 geometry. Some do algebra 1 geometry, algebra 2. But my point is this young woman was not an honor student, but she was in there with her peers that were 2 years younger, and she was far superior than them at geometry. So at this stage, we taught logic, we taught proofs. And in the school system now, they've gotten away from it, which is a shame because it's rigorous and students don't like it.
Mhm.
However,
Mhm.
it's teaching you how to problem solve, which is really what everybody needs to do in life, right? So it's not about the curriculum. When students say, oh, when am I going to use this? Like, you might not use this, but you're learning how to study, you're learning how to persevere, you're learning how to problem solve. And those things they're important in everyday life, right? So geometry uses a part of our brain that really isn't developed until the mid-20s. You're 20-year-olds, right? So if you look at teens, who I love, they have a problem sometimes making decisions. They can't see the consequences, right, of something, right? And that is because that part of the brain is not developed yet, right? They can't connect that if I do A, that in between A and D, there's a couple other things, right? And this is so geometry is difficult when you're younger. And so taking it when you're a little bit older is actually advantageous. But our school system doesn't do that because they want to get students to calculus, right? Because some parents really want their students to push to get to calculus. But in the end, if they would have a stronger algebraic background, they would do better in calculus, right? So a lot of this too is parents want their students to go, if they are going to go to college, and not all students have to go to college, but if they are, they want them to go in with AP credits and different things, which is great. But a stronger foundation is always going to be better in the long run. But it's hard to convince parents who want the very best for their kids that maybe sitting back a little bit is better.
No,
academically.
No, that makes sense. I mean, this is also my take as a non-public school teacher, but a public university teacher. You touched upon a couple of things. Before we continue, I wanted you to tell us, why are you here in Tampa this week? What are you?
Oh,
what have
that's
you been doing?
true. Yes. So I am grading AP statistics tests for the College Board. So I started teaching AP statistics, I don't know, 20 years ago now. And I've graded them since 2009. And so this is, it's a lot of grading of statistics, but there's high school kids all over the world taking these tests to earn college credit. And it's really a win-win. Like, even if they don't get the college credit, they've taken this course and then they could go to college and take it again. But I also teach statistics at Wilmington University. And, these are working people that I wish they would have taken statistics when they were in high school, because again, that's a course I think everybody should take, even if they think they don't need it. It's, if you're going to go get a master's or a doctorate one day, you're going to be able to do research. You're going to go into any STEM field. You'll be able to, do research. My husband's a sports medicine doctor. He needs to read studies. And when he went to medical school, he had never taken it. So
that's interesting. Actually, I agree with you. I also believe you mentioned before that we want that as humans, we need to be problem solvers.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to also say that we need to be able to do critical analysis of important things, decisions made by companies and government and school boards and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so from my point of view, it's not even a question of preparation for college. Being able to understand statistics, understand how to look at data, how to see trends, and how to make informed decisions for you and your family.
Yes.
Because until we're able to, using logic, and I took an elementary logic course my freshman year in college, it was super helpful.
Right.
By the way, and our kids are going to take logic at their co-op for this reason, because it teaches you about false arguments that at the surface seem to be correct, but you realize they're not, that the factors are not connected, and therefore the logic is false, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think between not being able to do logical reasoning and data analysis, critical analysis, just to be a good human being, is important. But you mentioned STEM. Let's talk about that. One of the big, and even though I'm a STEM guy and I'm an electrical engineer doing biomedical engineering, a lot of research, I've invented all kinds of stuff. I travel all over the world doing all this stuff that I do. And you would think, wow, I'm like, go STEM. And I would say to you, that's not for everybody. And society doesn't need everybody. Everybody doesn't know how to code.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the mistakes I believe that we made, and I want to explain what I think was the mistake and why it's important, was every kid should go off and learn how to code. I'm not against that at all, but they should learn how to play music. They should learn about art. They should learn about nature. Okay. And this focus and what I see happening to education at a bigger level is it's become transactional. So when we were students, we wanted to just go learn, to become enlightened. Okay. And yes, we wanted to make sure that when we graduated, we'd have a career that we wanted to engage in. But there was this belief that taking some of the classes that didn't fit, in my case, some of the non-engineering classes, that I remember kind of bemoaning, why am I taking psychology and sociology and economics? I want to do engineering. Wound up being perhaps the most important classes I took as a college student, right? So I think part of the problem we've run into is we're viewing education as an ends to a means, and we're not just allowing kids to learn. And do you see any evidence of that, mostly from the parent side or from the kid side? What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, I think two things. I think the things that would be highly interesting to students, right? Really engaging to students, we have made it, we don't have time for it, because they test so much.
Mm-hmm.
There's weeks and weeks of testing and practice for testing. So the fun math activity that involves art or involves music, the teachers can't do it, right? And then that's not as great for the students. But the other thing is, I mean, you just touched on something, but, even my college students, I teach sophomores in college right now, and they just have a lot of anxiety about their grade. They're worried about their grade. They're worried about their future. And they're less worried about the learning. And you mentioned transactional. I think that's right. And it's not their fault, because we have made it starting in fourth grade that you're going to do testing. Right. And then in fifth grade, you're going to do testing. So we've assigned a value to them in the testing. There's countries, Sweden is usually the country people talk about the most. They do no testing until students are 16 years old.
Right.
And I think what's a shame for parents whose students are in the traditional school system is they can opt their students out of testing. So I opt my son out of testing. I know other teachers that opt their kids out of testing, because it's stressful for them.
Well, the amount of anxiety it causes
Yes.
on them.
Now, when they get to hit middle school and high school, I think it's okay, right? Because now they are going to start taking more high stakes testing. If they want to go to college, they may need to take the SATs. But there's an interesting thing. Around the time of COVID, colleges stopped requiring SATs.
Right.
So now, as an example, where I teach at the University of Delaware, they're starting to have the SAT be needed to enter again. And the reason that's important is I'm teaching sometimes, some students in the classroom, and they don't know their times tables. They're in college and they don't know their times tables, right? So why did that happen? A couple things. When this technology beefed up and we have this internet, people started saying, well, we don't need to memorize stuff. We could look it up, online. So academically, at least in math, we backed off memorizing stuff. But the problem is, if somebody has to think about what 6 times 5 is and they don't know what 6 times 5 is, they can't do the higher level math.
Right,
so at some point, you're going to have to memorize stuff. And we have gone through this period in public education where we don't want kids to memorize stuff, but that's crazy. We memorize things all the time. We memorize passwords for a computer, right? Like I have to go into the bank and know my account number. I have to know my social security number. So we just really went too far with not doing some things that they need to do to access the more interesting and rigorous things.
Well, and that's a very good point. I like to add to that if you don't mind.
No, please do.
As my guest,
you've
I'm going to ask your permission.
You've been a professor, so I was going to ask you what you think of all this.
Well, I agree. I think what I want to come back to this point, and please don't let me drift too far away. And I remember someone that I know, he's a good person, was lamenting on a post on Facebook, why is my kid learning the recorder? And this is not useful. You'll never, and so privately, I spoke with them. I said, the reason why our kids usually in the 4th grade learn the recorder is not that they're going to become a musician. It's activating, it's powering a part of their brain that actually helps their cognitive development. And so more recently, MIT came out and said it's better for your kids to go and learn to play a musical instrument than the code. And now that AI has come along and pretty much taken most of the coding jobs away, and for those of you out there who thought, coding was going to be the solution to your child's future employment, it's going to be part of everything that we do. But as a main profession, it's no longer viable because of AI, as are a lot of the other white collar jobs where a college degree was enough to get you started. It's not anymore. Now it's going to be truly skills based, especially hands-on skills. Now I'm a little bit older than you, Eileen, but I remember when I was in high school, we went to the same school system, even had the same elementary PE teacher, right?
Yeah.
So we were on 2 paths. There was VOTech, vocational technology, become an auto mechanic, a plumber, a carpenter, and so on, or the academic path and go to the university. So sometime, and I believe it was around the period of President Obama, we really went all in. And a statement was even made that if you don't go to college, you're going to be left behind. And so there was this huge push for everyone to go to the university. 2 things happened. One, we lost our practical skills, which, by the way, while AI and robotics, which I'm involved in with my research, will eventually replace some of these manual jobs as well. They're not going to be replaced anywhere near as quickly as the white collar jobs. So if you know how to fix your car engine, change a tire, put the roof on your house and so on, your employability is going to be much more guaranteed. In fact, Elon Musk was talking about that recently. We were watching a video about that. So I think we need to go back to recognizing that, one, not every kid is going to be academically inclined, and we're trying to force them into a life path that they're just not naturally comfortable with. And we've been telling them that that's the only way to be successful. And yet that's all changing with AI. I have a feeling that this may help this conversation about some of the challenges we're both running into. Maybe this change in employment reality post high school will help help correct some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But getting back to the point before that I asked you not to let me forget, I already forgot. So what was it we were talking about?
You were going to say something about our high school education. Oh, you were talking about the different paths. Well, that's another thing.
Right.
I already forgot whatever you were going to say,
yeah.
but I will say this. When I first started teaching, we had, an honors track, a college prep track, and then what we called at that juncture, a general education track. And essentially, when people talk about equity, right, and equality, I think people, confuse that, and people felt, well, general education, we don't want them to feel less than.
Mm-hmm.
So then all we really did was rename it,
Mm-hmm.
and they use different names, but it's the same thing. And when we went to school, we were largely grouped in by ability.
Mm-hmm.
So the students that were really good at math were all together.
Right.
And then people that needed more support were all together. And then people didn't like that. So then we started mixing students up.
Right.
So from an educational point of view, if I have groups that are more similar, in math especially, it's easier for me to teach. When I have more diverse groups, now you need to differentiate your instruction. And this is hard, right? You have 30. I mean, I've had classes in high school of 37 kids. You have 37 kids for 45 minutes, right? And everybody has different needs. It's harder to teach.
I would imagine it's almost impossible.
Yeah, and we did that because we didn't want people's feelings to be hurt for which group they were in. When we were kids, it was the reading group, was the Blue Jays and the Cardinals, and we gave them bird names. But frankly, students know where they are.
Mm-hmm.
They know if they need more support. They know if it's something they're really good at, right? But I just think we're very, especially now on the feelings aspect of it, and it's really shortchanging these kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you add to that we don't hold kids back anymore in the public school system.
That's another problem. Yeah.
And it was when we were young, it was something that happened. We do not do that. So what happens? They move on to the next grade. They still don't have the skills they need, and it's bad for them.
Well, so that, and by the way, now what I was going to talk about before. So learning needs to be foundational, not transactional. And what I mean by that is if you're not building a strong foundation, so rather than trying to push advanced learning to lower levels with the misguided notion that somehow it's gonna enhance knowledge, learning, ability, it does the exact opposite. And I'll tell you a story from my university. I won't give any names in case some of these colleagues are still around watching the podcast. We had to go from, even at the university level, we've had to reduce the curriculum, number of credit hours. For just a course, I'm going to give the name, network theory, which is the circuits, signals, it's electrical engineering, blah, blah, blah. I had 3 semesters of network theory when I was an undergrad. And it was a lot, and it was heavy lifting. These were hard courses. Where I'm a professor now, we were already down to 2 classes. And then the state legislature decided, well, we need to reduce that to 1. And so we had a couple of faculty meetings discussing this. And so what are we going to do? And so I believe it was correct, otherwise I wouldn't have said it, right? I said, well, we cannot take 3 semesters worth of material,
right,
and squeeze it down into 1 semester. We can't do that. And one of my colleagues is like, well, we don't have a choice. We have to cover it all. And I'm like, well, how do you do that?
Right.
And I made the comment, I said, I'd rather the students understand 50% of the material well, and that they would be able to figure it out on their own than to just buzz through like an airplane flying over the countryside. Oh, I know America. I flew over at 40,000 feet in 5 hours. I've been across the U.S. I know the United States, right? You can't do that.
So why did the state legislators want to mandate this?
Well, that's a good question. Part of it is because engineering, part of it was probably getting back to why we should learn statistics and critical analysis is that, well, you know, engineering is not really a 4-year degree, by the way. Just so you know, it's not really 4 years. Very rarely, the super bright kids that are very well prepared can do it in 4 years, but normally it takes 5. And so the idea was, well, you know, we need to make sure that everybody can get their bachelor's degree in 4 years, regardless of the level of effort required. And since most university administrators are not in the STEM area, they don't understand. And so we've had to deal with this. And so what's happened to us is that then the students go for now pretty much when I was got my bachelor's degree in 1983, a bachelor's degree was sufficient to launch my engineering career and eventually retire as an electrical engineer at that time. Already there were indications, of course, a master's degree would help you to have a little more control over what you did in your job and a little bit higher salary, a little more job security. By the time I started teaching in the mid 90s, it was almost mandatory to get a master's degree. Right. And the students who in engineering, and I'm sorry for those of you out there who are, you know, whose kids want to be engineers. And by the way, it's an amazing career. Been doing this for nearly 45 years. And I've enjoyed everything that I've done, and I'm still viable. I'm still doing my thing. I didn't go to the dark side, as we call it, and go into management. I still do engineering. It's still possible. Of course, I have a master's and a PhD as well, right? But pretty much what was our dad, 4-year civil engineering degree, University of Rhode Island, 1959 was enough for him to raise his family, send all 3 of us to college, and retire at 62.5. And now that's gone, because of all this diluting. So not only, by the way, are we reducing the number of credit hours, we're also adding more non-engineering classes. So, and again, part of it is the feelings, and we want to make sure people are treated the same, but none of us are the same, right? And and I believe, getting back to your comment about the kids who are in the Blue Jays or the Cardinals reading class, the kids know if they're not really up to
that was me. Level. I just, you know, and again, I think some of it is, you know, everybody's going to have their strengths and their weaknesses. And we've landed in a time where it feels like everybody thinks everything should be a strength. And that's very hard. And this is what causes the pressure for these students, right? You know, academically to just go. The big thing now is the 5 years you get an undergrad and a master's. The 4+1. You know, I mean, it took me 4 years to get an education degree. It took me 2.5 years to get my master's. So again, we are, you know, we're selling this to kids. We're going to get you in, we're going to get you out, you're going to raise more money, but the depth of what they're learning cannot be the same because it's a shorter amount of time. Right, I mean, there's no way around it.
We have to stop viewing it as a transactional thing and start thinking about education as foundational.
Right.
And it's the only thing I would say. I'm proud to say I just graduated my 19th doctoral student.
It's amazing.
And which has been a great experience. At the PhD level, we haven't had this degrading of a PhD is still a PhD. But, you know, there's even pressure there because I don't know how it is. We'll talk about this in a minute. You know, I get my annual evaluation based on research funding that I bring in, student credit hours that I teach, service to the university, to the department, to my profession, to the world, right? And also the number of students I graduate, master's and PhD. So there's and publishing papers. So there's pressure to get your numbers up. None of it is driving quality. None of it is necessarily driving long-term impact. And I often mentor a lot of young assistant professors, and I tell them, look, don't focus on tenure, which is pretty much after 5 or 6 years. If you don't get tenure, you get a year to fix it or find a new job. Don't focus on tenure. Focus on what comes after that. Focus on what the full professor will look like for you. That's your target. And if you do that right, tenure will be automatically awarded to you. So unfortunately, because of this pressure to test, because it's not about learning and about knowledge and about a feeling of joy that you're growing in your intellectual knowledge skills, because it's just about getting through Pavlov's dogs going through the hoops, we've messed it all up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to fix that other than one thing that this is the name of our podcast is Off the Lesson Plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea, and by the way, we're not advocating if whatever school mode your children are involved in. We have actually been public school, private school, charter school, magnet school. We did, and we've done traditional homeschooling in the home, and now we're doing co-ops. We've done online education, Florida virtual, OutSchool. We now have got it figured out. I would actually say Vaney has done an amazing job of figuring out what works, because this works for us because, one, we have a parent who is really focused on our kids learning, and not about achievement, but about learning and growing, and has the ability and desire to figure this all out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible, even if children are in public school, to supplement their education. If a parent sees, and this is easy to say, and I'm sure it's extremely difficult to do, especially when both parents are working. We know what that's like. Vaney also works. She has her company. But if you see, so the good news is if public school is the right thing for you, and it is for a lot of people, obviously, you can supplement that in the areas that your student needs help in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell a story from I only dropped a course once. My entire 14 years at the university, only dropped one course when I went to University of Maryland, and it was quantum mechanics, which I became extremely strong in. Because I went into this course, I wasn't well prepared. I was told it's going to be taught by an engineering professor. It was taught by a PhD in physics from Princeton,
Mm-hmm.
who taught it like a physicist and not an engineer. And I wound up actually having to withdraw from the course. Well, I spent the entire summer before my qualifying exam studying nothing but quantum mechanics. I had a shortcoming, and I fixed it. I passed my qualifying exam, and the rest is history. So, but I was older, more mature,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't under pressure from parents or the administrators or whatever. And so I recognized a deficiency and was able to fix it. And I think that's the part, what you said before is so telling, because we think our students should be great at everything. Are you great at everything? I'm not great at everything.
Yeah.
So we had to stop this idea that, you can do it. You can be whatever you want to be. Well, you can if you put the time and effort into that. And
Yes.
even if you do, it doesn't necessarily guarantee success, right? We're all individuals. So I'd like to say to the parents when you recognize that there's a shortcoming in your child's education, the first tendency is to blame the teacher or the school system.
Mm-hmm.
But really, blaming doesn't solve the problem. Taking responsibility does.
It does.
And so maybe we need to do some extra summer classes. Our kids, I don't want to talk about our kids much. It's not about them, but they're going to do extra studies online over the summer
Mm-hmm.
in math, because it's been shown, research shows that when kids do a little bit of math every day,
Yes.
when they go back to school in the fall, they're not hit by that brick wall of, and they have to pretty much, because mathematical, logical thinking doesn't necessarily happen organically, automatically, especially on summer vacation. So they're going to do like 20 minutes a day, just enough to kind of keep the neurons firing.
But the thing is, you're doing that, right? If you think about the last 20 years and the growth of youth sports
Mm-hmm.
and the shift in youth sports,
Wow.
and the amount of time that people spend getting their kids lessons in sports and speed and agility. And let's be clear, I've been a coach forever and I love it. But, when we were younger, we played sports, but it is a really big part of the lives. And it's a really big part of the family dynamic.
Mm-hmm,
And if
mm-hmm.
somebody has multiple kids that are playing multiple sports, and it could be sports, it could be music, it could be karate, but the things right now are taking kids away from sitting at home and practicing, doing some math, right? Reading a book, and if they're in school all day, and they come home from school and they do a sport and they eat. Next thing you know, it really is time for bed. And I think, some of that is good and healthy, and some of it is taking the place of doing homework. And so I see both sides of the coin. I see some schools right now give it no homework, none, and others do, right? Some give it what I think is too young. I don't think somebody in kindergarten, first, second grade should be doing, any long amounts of homework whatsoever. Maybe they do like one little worksheet with the mom and, the parent, the guardian, the dad, the grandparent, whoever it is, right? Some sort of adult figure. And then even in high school, when I taught AP and I taught calculus, I mean, you have to cap it. These they're tired. They are tired. I think bedtimes have shifted to later. I think the technology, the phones, the video games, their sleep it is a lot different as well. And so these are, there are students that will be up till 2 a.m. Some of them doing homework, some of them reading, some of them gaming, whatever they're doing. And then the school starts super early. So they're not even well rested, right? So there's so many
layers.
Facets,
There's so many layers. Actually, I've thought about the sports thing, but I wasn't thinking about it tonight. But thanks for bringing that up. There's been a huge focus on athletics for young kids. I think I know what's driving that. What are your thoughts as a basketball and softball coach, and you were also a player when you were in high school? What's driving that?
Obviously, these are just my opinions, but I think, when we were younger, and I can always go back to when we're younger, right? People lived in neighborhoods, their kids played in neighborhoods together. And now, with private schools and charter schools and homeschooling, the kids are kind of all over the place, right? So you have to find a place for your kid to be, right? A place to have belonging and have friendships. And what happens is once you start in on a sport, the parents start becoming friends with other parents, and then they just kind of want to stick with it, right? Because now this is sort of their village. And it just can really take a life of its own, for as much money as some of these travel sports can cost, and the amount of time. So I think they're good. It's not that, but I think that it's just so much different than when we were younger.
It's over the top. But you bring up a good point. We had neighborhood. We played baseball and basketball and threw the football around the frisbee. We didn't have it was I did Little League baseball. I didn't otherwise play organized sports.
Right.
And so now there seems to be, and it's a whole industry getting, so part of it, it's always about the money, unfortunately. And a lot of times the intent is good, but the outcome is not healthy for these kids. And I remember in ninth grade, I played in the junior high school football team, which, by the way, I sat on the bench most of the time. But on the last game, I did recover a fumble. I was so happy. Of course, I recovered the fumble because I was in the wrong place, but that's okay. From my point of view, it's like, yay. And my dad was there to see it. It was super happy, right? Yeah. But I remember in ninth grade, after school, going in the locker room, changing, practice, walking home. Back then, we actually walked home from school.
Right.
And there was no homework happening after that. So I've actually talked to some folks who, athletic scholarships are driving this as well. This idea that that it's not even so much that you're going to play pro ball. It's just that, wow, if you get an athletic scholarship, because colleges have become so expensive, right? So the cost, you're like, well, I want my child to go to college. They want to go to college, and if you can't afford it, well, one way to go is some kind of scholarship.
Should be a mascot. They give scholarships to be a college mascot.
There you go. That I could have done. Actually, it's funny. I remember talking to one parent. It's like, my kid's going to play golf. Really? It's like, yeah, it's pretty easy to get golf scholarships. I'm like, I don't know. There aren't that many players on the golf team at college, but our dad was captain of his college golf team. But I just think that somehow I believe what's happened, they're all good intentions, but somehow we're it's almost like we're too smart for ourselves. We're trying to use technology where it doesn't belong. And we're trying to, because it comes down to the fact that we're social beings.
Mhm.
And we've lost our community because everybody's isolated. And then the pandemic came and it really accelerated that. And there's this,
Mhm.
kids roaming the neighborhood. Like when we were growing up, you don't see that hardly ever anymore. So we have to, I never thought of that. We have to, or one of the ways to get them to find their tribe would be, okay, let's join a sports team,
Yeah.
and go ice skating or jiu-jitsu or
Right.
ice hockey or baseball, whatever. But I think I like to, yeah. So I think that's one thing we're identifying. This is good from the point of view, I believe, before, speaking of analysis,
Mhm.
before you are able out there to think about what changes you might make that would truly benefit your child or your children. And that's really what we're trying to do here. Okay. Is think about, share what we've gone through in the hope that someone out there may say, you know what, I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I'm going to start doing that, or I'm going to stop doing that. So
Mhm.
one of the things that's happened is, again, this push towards group activities, and the parents have, which means the parents have to organize.
Mhm.
Did our parents really know where we were half the time?
No, they did not.
Probably we wouldn't have survived
I mean,
childhood if they knew.
we do joke back then they would have a commercial at 10 p.m. and it would ask, "Do you know where your children are?"
Yeah,
It was an actual commercial in the 70s and 80s, because people would be outside
right,
playing, right? And but we live in a world now where it's can be scary to have your kids outside playing,
right,
right?
right, right.
So we had a lot of change in a very short time. And a lot of information comes at us through social media
Hmm.
of bad things and scary things that makes you really, want to be cautious,
Right,
where
right,
your
right,
kids are and that you want to be there, right? So this is part of the things with the sports, like the parents are there often, and then you
right,
have your
right.
eyes on your kid, which is, our world's a lot different. But one thing you mentioned was COVID. I mean, COVID's not a small thing in terms of what's happening in the school, because the technology has always existed, but that just pushed everything to
Right,
technology.
right,
So
right.
now all of these public schools, charter schools, have Chromebooks, they have one-on-one Chromebooks. And so students, despite the fact that we know that a large amount of screen time is not good,
Right.
they spend a lot of time at certain schools, all over the country, the world, whatever, on screens because there's a cool activity. And it's not that they're playing videos, but again, they're on screens instead of typing. So now there's countries, which is fantastic, that are getting rid of all the technology.
That's right.
No more Chromebooks.
Well, Sweden is a great
No,
example.
yes,
So,
no more online textbooks.
mhm,
um, and they have tons of research that's saying writing stuff helps you to learn. It's not the same as typing
that's
stuff,
right.
right?
That's right.
Literally flipping a page of a book, instead of on a screen. So I do think we are starting to recognize, but COVID just made us have to use technology.
Right.
And some of it's good, right? Some of the stuff that we, had to learn or had to adapt are good in resource, in chunks, but ultimately in a classroom, the teacher's the expert. The teacher should be teaching,
Right.
shouldn't be leaning on, the Chromebook in front of the student to be doing
Right.
things
Right.
at all, really.
Yeah, Linus had his blanket, and unfortunately now technology's become the blanket.
Hmm.
And I think what I came to understand a little bit later than I wish I had, and Vaney really was laser focused from day one on the dangers of technology for our
Hmm.
kids, and I really credit her for that, because I, as an adult, I'm like, I didn't inherently see the
Hmm.
danger because my brain was fully developed. I've read, tons of books and written all these papers, and wrote a dissertation and all this stuff, proposals. I mean, it's so, to me, it's like it was just helping me to do things more efficiently. But you realize that until you've done that type of traditional learning,
Hmm.
and the two ways, really the two ways that help us to best remember information and things is to write it down, physically write it down, not type it. So I still write notes, and I have pieces of paper all over the place, and every now and then I put them onto one piece of paper, notes and things. I've got notebooks everywhere. And the other thing is because I teach, that's the best way to learn is when you verbalize stuff, when you read it and you write it down and then you speak it back. So one thing that happened to me, and I know that public school is a different situation probably from when we were students. We had study hall when I was a kid. And even though I never studied in study hall, but some of the kids would study in study hall. They studied together. So at the university, I've been asking this question every semester. I'm like, hey, do you guys do study groups? And they look at me like, what's that? I'm like, well, you get together and they're like, well, I said, look, and I go into how do you facilitate learning? It's by writing it down. And yes, I'm teaching with PowerPoint, which I have a love-hate relationship with. I'm teaching with PowerPoint and then saying, look, you see this, it looks nice and fancy and colors and graphics is great, but you're not writing it down and you're not speaking it. So, you can, and by the way, stop memorizing. We can, knowledge is not memorizing facts. Knowledge is understanding things. And that's another problem, going back to what you touched upon earlier in this podcast, about this push towards, not memorizing the multiplication table, or yes, you can get facts. You can go, as I call it, Dr. Google, and you can find the answer to anything you want to find the answer to. But will you understand the context, what the answer means, right? So I think Sweden, getting back to your comment before, the Swedes did an amazing thing. They got rid of all the paper books, physical books, and they gave out tablets to all the kids. And they noticed that their learning just plummeted. Yep. They got rid of all the tablets and brought back the books. And that's a money thing, right? It's expensive to have printed books and to have, turn in the books at the end of the year and have to deal with the logistics, the storage of the books, the cost of the books, having to buy the new edition. It's always cheaper to just get the ebook or the PDF. But I think we need to, as a society, not forget the value. I think there's value in two things that I feel very strongly about, and the first one is physical books. I don't like having to read anything enjoyable on my computer screen or my phone or tablet. I still like to read books for this reason. Okay, it's different feel. It puts my mind into a more contemplative, more peaceful, deeper thinking mode. But the second thing that I think we've missed the point on is this idea that we're going to keep our kids busy, that having them be busy is good for their development.
Right.
Okay. When in fact, and Vaney was the one who pointed this out to me. It's like the kids need to be bored.
Wow.
Because when there's boredom is when they have to learn to be creative. They have to learn how to find ways to occupy themselves. But here's one of the challenges of boredom. Their go-to is going to be what?
Well, screens.
Yeah, screens, right? So if you don't get them into the point where they're curious and able to fill the boredom with useful things when they're young, if you wait too long, their go-to is going to be a video game or scrolling YouTube stuff, and because it was easier for us. We didn't have those incredible distractions to occupy our time. We ran around with sticks and pretended we were soldiers in the Middle Ages or something. I mean, we did all kinds of crazy stuff, and now we don't even. We would get out there. I remember the neighbors had a crabapple tree. Man, we did more stuff with those crab apples. We didn't have a baseball. Well, we'll just use the crab apples and get a stick and literally start whacking crab apples with the stick. And now, I need to have this special Willie Mays bat, and the expensive glove, and I can't just throw a baseball. I got to have the uniform, got to have the special shoes. Come on, whatever happened to just playing pickup ball?
Right.
And and that's where this focus on organized sports bothers me, is that everything has to be planned, a schedule, requires money, requires organization. And so it's a combination of kids can no longer play in the neighborhood with other kids. That's part of it. And part of it is that the expectation is that we're all going to be trying out for the Major League Baseball team. Right. So we better get in the groove now, right? Yeah. So I know I just kind of wandered over a whole bunch of topics.
No, but you did bring up Bruno's here too.
Yeah.
You brought up being bored, some of that's creativity, right? So, my college students, I were talking about this at the end of the semester, when students are young in general and also in schools, whatever type of schooling they're in, creativity is there, right? We color, we draw, we play music,
We
right? We
daydream.
dance,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We do stuff. And then what happens is the schools really take away the desire for people to be creative.
Right.
So even when I got my doctorate, I told them this story. I got my doctorate and I had this, he was an adjunct, and we had a choice to do something creative or to write like a 12-page paper or whatever it was. And I mean, all you really do is write paper. So I was like, well, I'm going to do the creative thing. So it was about a book on leadership. It was the 4 different lenses to look at something. And so I did a drawing, and I'm not an artist, but I'm like, I'm just not going to write a paper, but I did a drawing, and actually one of my high school students helped me, and I painted this drawing, and then I had to explain the 4 different frames through this drawing, right? And I mean, honestly, when you're getting a doctorate, for the most part, unless things are really crazy, you're getting an A or a B in the class, as long as you're doing the work, right? So it was a low risk thing to do. However, what was interesting is very few people in this course chose to do anything creative. They were happy to write yet another 12-page paper because they didn't want to go out of their comfort zone, right?
Exactly.
But the funny thing is, I learned more doing that because it had me synthesize the stuff in the book and translate it to like, well, what would represent like these different lenses? It was awesome. I mean, I don't have it anymore. I threw it out. I wish I would have kept it. But the point is, we really suck creativity out of people as they get older. Now, what is fun to me is I see people, adults I know, taking like a tap dance class,
Right.
or, I mean, people are doing, someone's starting to play pickleball in their old age, not even old age, but older. And I think that's good because I think people are creative. We just forget.
Right. Well, we get into the groove. Actually, yeah, or old guys starting a podcast.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that'd be a good name for your podcast.
I know, right? So off the lesson plan. But so that was comment I was going to make before. Steve Jobs, if you've never seen his documentary, the documentary about him, his biography, it's amazing. So he went to college, and he just went to college to go to college. He didn't really know what he wanted to do. One of the courses that he took a bunch of random stuff. He took a calligraphy class, which is about, and then he's the guy that was driving fonts. And if you watch the documentary about Steve Jobs, 2 things come to mind. One, he took a bunch of random stuff, and one of this was calligraphy because thought it was interesting, and later turned it into, I don't know how much money he made over, going from computer letters and numbers to cool looking fonts and things. Now it's gone probably too far, right? But he's basically, I forget exactly, I need to rewatch the documentary, but he talked about that. It's like, just kind of do what you enjoy doing, just learn. And he was doing the just learn for the sake of learning thing. And then later he was able to monetize that, right? So I think for those of us, it's scary to be off the lesson plan. It's scary to do a creative project for credit instead of inside your nice, comfortable box. I can write a 12-page paper in an afternoon. And the creative thing might take me a month, but you're going to have so much more fun. It did actually
take longer.
Yeah,
it did take longer.
Of course it took
longer. But
longer.
I mean, you bring up, and this is interesting, you mentioned Steve Jobs taking a calligraphy class. So, in education, teachers get their degree, and then you get pay raises by taking classes, right? And you can, bump your pay up. And, when I first started teaching, they have different classes you could take at teacher centers, but you could go to a college and take a class to get a pay raise. And some of the classes I took a bird call class.
Demonstrate for us.
I will not. I took a scenery, it was a graduate level scenery painting class.
Cool.
I took such fun things. So in the summer, after teaching all year, which is, you've been a teacher forever, right? You're with other people's kids. You give a lot of your heart and soul as a teacher, a lot of money you spend on stuff in your classroom, which is fine, and then you have summer, and summers weren't aren't really off. Like I always worked camps, right? Like because you needed to make some money. So my point though is this. So even that they make it now to get the pay raises, it has to be part of a degree. So to get pay raises, teachers will end up having 2 master's degrees. And I'm thinking, you know what would be nice? Let them go do something fun.
Sure.
Let them learn what it's like to be a student again. Let them learn the joy of something so they can go back to their classroom and feel joyful instead of feeling like they just had to do something to try to make ends meet, because that's really what it is. Like you do need money to live, right? So
Mhm.
it's not that you don't want to get a master's, but it's just interesting to me because those classes that I mentioned are great memories for me
Mhm.
of fun things I
Mhm.
learned. They were refreshing. I don't know, and
Well, they were intellectually stimulating,
exactly.
and they were outside the box,
Yep.
and as a result, they were memorable.
Yep.
So imagine a teacher like yourself, and you didn't win the presidential STEM award in mathematics for the state of Delaware because you were an inside the box person.
Mhm.
You did all these things, and it benefited you tremendously. Made you a better teacher, a better human
Mhm.
being, a happier camper, right? So imagine I didn't realize this. I'm learning a lot from you, by the way. Thanks so
Oh, well,
much.
thanks.
It's always good to learn from your kid sister, right? Especially when she's a smarty pants. But well, I'm a little bit too biased when it comes to Eileen. But anyway, how can you espouse or ooze the wonder and the joy of learning when you're not yourself as a teacher able to tap into that?
Right.
Right? When you're being forced to conform to the system because if you don't do this, you're not going to keep your job or whatever. And I can imagine, by the way, the bird calling class sounds
That
like a
was
lot of
great. It
fun,
was
man.
fantastic.
That's amazing. And and things like that. So I think, maybe maybe the hope we have for our society is to stop looking at everything as a job opportunity.
Mhm.
And we talk about personal growth, but we're not really doing it, right?
Right.
And the only people who talk about personal growth who are really doing it are those that want to monetize it and
Yes.
teach or coach and do personal growth. But we all should be doing personal growth. And we don't do that by just running on the same treadmill. We got to go do
Well,
something else,
and
right?
I think you talked about this earlier. The reality is we are in a time right now where being very busy
Mm,
is a badge of honor.
right.
It really is. And I don't know what that is. We just feel like we have to be busy, busy, busy. And we sign, even for us, we'll sign our son up for this and that. And we're like, oh
Mhm.
man, and it's hard to find that balance, right?
Right.
Because and some of that is screen time, right? So I like him not to be on a screen. So I'm going to sign him up for more things so he's not
Right.
on a screen.
Well,
But
that's
then
right.
that has us, we're grabbing dinner and it is very complex, right? And so again, it's an unintended consequence, right? You're trying to keep everybody happy and busy and active and find community. And the next thing you know, you're stressed
Right.
because you're just too busy.
Well, that's right. One thing that my family, we've always done this, and I'm not a big board game person, but I realize thanks to Vaney coaching me on this, that actually winds up being the times where we really
Hmm.
were able to have a great time together as a family. Our kids, we were playing Risk when they were like 7, 8 years old,
Mhm.
right? Monopoly when they were 5. Monopoly was great. They learned about money. They learned about investing. They understood they had to pay taxes, don't pass go, don't collect your
Mhm.
$200. So, it was an amazing life lesson board game, and it didn't involve screens. So I think we still can do that, but well, let's face it, we're exhausted.
Well, that's right.
After a whole day working, taking care of the kids, whatever you're doing, the idea of sitting down and having to concentrate on a board game. But if you don't do that, they'll fall into the screen time trap,
Yep.
right? So I think it's, listen, parents, we're all parents in this conversation probably, or some of you want to be parents. I will say to you the following, okay? Being a dad is the best job I've ever had. I would not trade what I'm doing for anything else in the world, for all of the accolades and awards and blah, blah, blah honors that I've achieved. Being a dad to my kids is the most gratifying, rewarding thing I've ever done. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we've covered a lot of territory tonight.
Yeah, a lot.
And we covered, I know I fixed a few of my problems. I don't know if it helped anybody else, but I think it is true what we say about hope. Don't lose hope. Not everybody can afford a private school or private tutors or to homeschool or to go to a charter school, magnet school, whatever we all have our own boundary conditions, being an engineering term. We all have our own reality. But you can still make it work. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of resources, but I'm just so glad that you came down grading AP statistics exams and doing all this stuff. Any closing comments you'd like to make as a seasoned award-winning public school teacher?
Well, you've won a lot of awards too, so enough about me. But no, I mean, I do feel hopeful. The students I'm teaching now, I think, moving past COVID, it's going to take a while to get out of it because I think, were of the mindset they were isolated. So even getting them to work in groups and talk and interact every semester, it's better and better. So it's really encouraging. And what I would say is this generation, they just give me a lot of hope and I just think we kind of have to figure out good things to rein in, to help, everybody learn wherever they are, whatever kind of situation they're in. Right. Yep. And thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming, Dr. Sato Voltz.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sato.
And I want to echo what you said as well. I have tremendous hope for the future. Mm-hmm. What I see in today's young people is a goodness, is a kindness, is a sincerity that gives me hope.
Yeah.
And if we, as the big people in the room, can guide them, give them the guardrails they need to develop into functional, happy, productive. And by productive, I mean, they have their families and they can live the life they want to live without having to have a lot of fear and anxiety over making ends meet or whatever, right? But I really have a lot of hope for this generation. A lot of really good kids out there. And there always have been, but their focus is not what our focus was on, which is, get a degree and start a career and make money. And it's more like, hey, what can I do in this world? There's so many amazing things that you can do. So they have many more options than we ever had. But I believe what comes with that is a lot of anxiety. It's almost like there are almost too many options.
And you have Anxious Generation's a great book.
Yeah, that's right. And we've read it. And we're going to talk about that in the podcast.
It's another podcast, not me.
Yeah, not with, I'm going to make the Anxious Sister happen if I continue here. But well, anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us on Off the Lesson Plan. And thank Dr. Eileen Sato Voltz, who was here grading AP statistics tests for the entire country of the United States of America. If you ever wonder how those AP credits wind up becoming college credits, you have to go through this woman.
And 500 other people too.
And by the way, how many exams did you grade this week, roughly?
Me personally or all of us?
You personally.
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, so we grade 7 straight days, 8 to 5. So, I mean, it's probably around 15 and a little over 1,500, somewhere between 1,500 and.
So between 1,500 and 2,000 exams.
It's a lot. I mean, I don't know, but it's fun to do. It's, good to be with other teachers and professors and learn and keep growing and have some fun
Well, we have a tradition in the United States of thanking the military folks for their service. I want to thank you as an academic, as a teacher, as a grader for your service to our children. That's really great. Thank you so much.
All right. Yes.
All right. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.